A pilot, a doctor, a lawyer. 3 professions, 3 identities, 1 teenager. According to the story, before his 21st birthday, he had traveled the world posing as professionals he had never trained to be. He cashed forged checks, evaded authorities, and left a trail of deception stretching across continents. The FBI spent years trying to catch him. Hollywood turned his life into a blockbuster movie, and millions came to know his name, Frank Abagnale. But there is a problem. Decades later, investigators began digging into the details: court records, newspaper archives, government documents. And what they found raised an uncomfortable question. What if one of the greatest fraud stories ever told was itself a fraud? Tonight, we're opening the case file on a man who may have fooled banks, airlines, and law enforcement, or perhaps fooled all of us.
To understand Frank Abagnale, we need to go back to the beginning. Long before the FBI, long before the forged checks, and long before the world knew his name. Frank William Abagnale Jr. was born on April 27, 1948, in Bronxville, New York. On the surface, his childhood appeared ordinary. He grew up in a middle-class family during a period of unprecedented prosperity in America. The post-war economy was booming. New suburbs were rising across the country, and for many families, the future seemed bright. But behind closed doors, things were beginning to unravel. Frank's parents' marriage was falling apart. As tensions grew within the household, young Frank found himself caught between 2 worlds. Years later, he would describe his father's approval as something he desperately sought. His father, Frank Abagnale Sr., was charismatic, well-connected, and successful in business. To the young Frank, he was larger than life, but success can be fragile, and when fortunes change, children often notice more than adults realize. By his teenage years, Frank had already discovered something important. People trusted appearances. A well-dressed man was trusted more than a poorly dressed one. A confident voice was trusted more than a hesitant one, and authority was rarely questioned. These observations would become the foundation of everything that followed. According to Abagnale's own accounts, his first significant scam came while he was still a teenager. His father had given him a gasoline credit card to help pay for fuel and vehicle expenses. Instead, Frank began using the card in a scheme that exploited a weakness in the system. He would convince gas station attendants to provide cash in exchange for purchases charged to the account, allowing him to pocket money while leaving the bills for someone else to pay. The scheme was simple, but it revealed something important. Frank wasn't interested in stealing through force. He preferred deception. He learned that the easiest way to take something wasn't to break in, it was to be invited in. By the mid-1960s, Frank's personal life was in turmoil. His parents divorced. The emotional impact was profound. At just 16 years old, he left home and began supporting himself. For most teenagers, that would have been a daunting challenge. For Frank Abagnale, it became an opportunity to reinvent himself, again and again and again. He was young, unknown, and almost entirely without resources, but he possessed something that would become his greatest weapon, the ability to make people believe he was someone else. The question was no longer whether Frank could fool people. The question was how far he could take it. And soon he would discover that a uniform could open doors that honesty never could. In the 1960s, there were few symbols of prestige more powerful than an airline pilot. Pilots were admired, respected, trusted. They traveled the world, earned impressive salaries, and carried an aura of authority that few people questioned. For a young man looking to reinvent himself, it was the perfect disguise. According to Frank Abagnale, the idea came after a chance encounter. One day, while trying to explain the loss of a pilot's uniform to an airline employee, he realized something remarkable. People treated pilots differently. Doors opened for them. Questions disappeared. Trust was automatic. And if trust could be earned through appearance alone, perhaps a uniform was worth more than money. Abagnale claimed he obtained a pilot's uniform and created a convincing identity for himself. Soon, he was presenting himself as a Pan-American World Airways pilot, better known as Pan Am. At the time, Pan Am was one of the most recognizable airlines on Earth. Its pilots represented professionalism, adventure, and global travel. Frank was none of those things, but he looked the part, and sometimes that was enough. According to his account, he began taking advantage of a little-known airline practice known as deadheading. Deadheading allowed airline crew members to occupy unused seats while traveling to another destination for work assignments. Abagnale claimed that by posing as a pilot, he was able to fly around the world at virtually no cost. New York, Miami, Paris, London, Rome, dozens of flights, hundreds of thousands of miles, all while pretending to be someone he wasn't. If the story is true, it was one of the boldest impersonation schemes in modern history. Imagine the pressure. Every conversation carried risk. Every airport employee could expose him. Every real pilot posed a threat. One mistake could bring everything crashing down. Yet according to Abagnale, the deception continued for months, then years. And the confidence grew. The uniform wasn't just a disguise, it was a master key. People didn't see a teenager, they saw a professional. And that perception changed everything. For Frank, the lesson was becoming clear. The appearance of authority often mattered more than authority itself. But there was another benefit to the pilot persona. The travel, the constant movement, the ability to disappear. As law enforcement began noticing fraudulent checks appearing across multiple states, tracking the suspect became increasingly difficult. Witnesses remembered a pilot. Banks remembered a pilot. Hotel staff remembered a pilot. The image itself became part of the deception. And with every successful scam, Frank's legend grew larger. Yet decades later, researchers would begin examining these stories more closely. And some found gaps, questions, missing records, details that proved difficult to verify. Did Frank travel extensively while posing as a pilot? Evidence suggests he likely did. Did every event occur exactly as he later described? That remains a subject of debate. But one fact is beyond dispute. The pilot identity transformed Frank Abagnale from a small-time fraudster into something much bigger, an imposter capable of operating on a global stage. And he wasn't finished yet, because after successfully convincing people he could fly an airplane, he would attempt something even more dangerous. He would convince them he could save lives. By now, Frank Abagnale had learned a valuable lesson. A uniform could open doors, a title could create trust, and confidence could often overcome doubt. But pretending to be an airline pilot was one thing. Pretending to be an That was something else entirely. Lives were at stake. Mistakes could have deadly consequences. Yet according to Abagnale, that is exactly what he did. In his autobiography, Abagnale claimed that after leaving the airline impersonation behind, he adopted a new identity. This time he posed as a physician. Specifically, he claimed to have worked as a supervising doctor at a hospital in Georgia. The story quickly became one of the most famous chapters in his legend. According to Abagnale, he managed to secure the position by presenting himself as an experienced medical professional. He allegedly oversaw interns and medical staff while avoiding situations that might expose his lack of training. If true, it would have been one of the most astonishing acts of deception in modern history. But there was one problem. Medicine isn't aviation. A pilot can sometimes avoid scrutiny. A doctor faces it every day. Patients, nurses, specialists, administrators, all expecting competence, all expecting expertise. And eventually, according to Abagnale, the pressure became too great. He claimed he walked away before anyone was harmed, before his lack of medical knowledge could be exposed, before disaster struck. It's a remarkable story, perhaps too remarkable. Years later, journalists and investigators attempted to verify the details. Some found evidence suggesting Abagnale had indeed spent time around a hospital environment. Others struggled to locate records supporting parts of the story exactly as he described them. As with many chapters of the Abagnale legend, separating fact from embellishment remains difficult. The further researchers dug, the more complicated the picture became. And yet, whether entirely accurate or partially exaggerated, the story revealed something important about Frank's methods. He understood human psychology. People often trusted credentials without verifying them. They trusted confidence, titles, appearances, and authority. Then came another claim, one that sounded even more impossible. According to Abagnale, he became a lawyer, not a law student, not a legal assistant, a lawyer. The story goes that after arriving in Louisiana, he adopted a new identity and secured a position connected to the state's legal system. According to his account, he studied intensively for several weeks and passed the Louisiana bar examination, a test that many qualified law graduates fail. The claim stunned audiences. How could someone with no legal education pass one of the most demanding professional exams in the country? Was it brilliance, luck, or something else entirely? Over the years, researchers again examined the details. Some aspects of the story remain difficult to independently confirm. Others appear to conflict with available records. What is clear is that Frank consistently portrayed himself as someone capable of stepping into highly specialized professions and convincing others he belonged there. Whether every detail occurred exactly as described remains a subject of debate. But the legend itself continued to grow. With every retelling, the stories became larger, the disguises more daring, the accomplishments more extraordinary. Doctor, lawyer, pilot. By now, Frank Abagnale was becoming more than a criminal. He was becoming a myth, and myths have a way of taking on lives of their own. But while the public focused on the disguises, investigators were beginning to focus on something else, the money, because behind every false identity was a much larger operation, one built on forged documents, counterfeit checks, and a fraud scheme that stretched across the country. The pilot, the doctor, the lawyer, these identities made headlines. They became the stories people remembered. But beneath the disguises was something far more important: money. Because while Frank Abagnale was capturing attention with his impersonations, investigators were chasing a different crime: a nationwide check fraud operation. And unlike many of the stories surrounding his various identities, this part of the case left a paper trail. To understand how Frank's scheme worked, you have to understand the era. This was America in the 1960s, long before online banking, long before instant verification, long before computers connected financial institutions in real time. Every day, millions of paper checks moved through the banking system, and that system relied heavily on one thing: trust. When someone handed over a check, businesses often accepted it with little immediate verification. Banks processed transactions slowly. Information moved at the speed of mail and paperwork, and for a clever fraudster, those delays created opportunity. Frank understood something that many people overlooked. A forged check didn't need to withstand scrutiny forever. It only needed to survive long enough to be cashed, long enough to clear, long enough for the money to disappear. By the time questions were asked, Frank was often already gone. According to authorities, Abagnale refined his methods over time. He altered account information, created convincing documents, and exploited weaknesses in banking procedures. His success wasn't based on sophisticated technology. It was based on understanding people, the tellers, the managers, the employees trained to trust what appeared legitimate, and perhaps most importantly, the confidence to present himself as someone who belonged. In many ways, Frank's greatest tool wasn't a forged document, it was performance. Every transaction required acting, the right clothes, the right story, the right attitude. He understood that most people don't expect deception, they expect normality. And when someone appears confident, many stop asking questions. As fraudulent checks surfaced across multiple states, law enforcement agencies began connecting the dots. What initially appeared to be isolated incidents started to reveal a larger pattern. The same methods, the same style, the same suspect. Banks were losing money, businesses were filing complaints, and investigators were beginning to realize they were dealing with someone unusually skilled. Not because he possessed advanced technical knowledge, but because he understood how systems worked, and more importantly, how they failed. The frauds continued, the losses mounted, and the chase intensified. With every successful transaction, Frank became more confident. But success can create a dangerous illusion, the illusion of invincibility. Every con artist eventually faces the same problem. The more they succeed, the greater the risks they take. And the greater the risks, the closer they move toward being caught. By now, authorities on both sides of the Atlantic were searching for him. Descriptions circulated, reports multiplied, and Frank's freedom was becoming increasingly fragile. The walls were closing in. The question was no longer whether investigators would find him. The question was when. For years, Frank had built his life around movement, new identities, new cities, new opportunities. But eventually every escape route runs out. And in 1969, the chase that had crossed countries and continents would finally come to an end. For years, Frank Abagnale had lived a life built on movement, new identities, new cities, new opportunities. Whenever suspicion grew, he moved on. Whenever questions were asked, he disappeared. It was a strategy that had worked remarkably well until it didn't. By the late 1960s, authorities in multiple countries were investigating a growing number of fraudulent checks linked to the same suspect. Banks had compared records. Witnesses had provided descriptions. Law enforcement agencies had begun sharing information. And for the first time, Frank was facing a problem he couldn't simply charm his way out of. People were connecting the dots. Among those determined to find him was an FBI agent named Joseph Shea. According to Abagnale's account, Shea became one of the key figures pursuing him. As reports accumulated, investigators slowly built a picture of the young man behind the disguises, a suspect who seemed capable of becoming anyone, a pilot, a doctor, a lawyer, or whatever identity the situation demanded. But no matter how many roles Frank played, one fact remained constant. He was running out of places to hide. In 1969, the chase led overseas. Frank had traveled extensively throughout Europe, where he continued operating under various identities. But maintaining a false life becomes harder over time. Every deception creates new risks. Every lie creates loose ends. And eventually, one of those loose ends catches up. According to the story, a former acquaintance recognized Frank in France and alerted authorities. Whether through luck, persistence, or a combination of both, investigators finally had their opportunity. The man who had spent years disappearing into crowds had been identified. And this time, there would be no easy escape. Frank Abagnale was arrested in France. The chase was over. Or so it seemed, because Frank's story was never simple. Following his arrest, he was imprisoned in France. Later, he was transferred to Sweden to face additional legal proceedings connected to fraud allegations there. For most criminals, this would have marked the end of the story. The inevitable consequence of years spent breaking the law. But Frank Abagnale had built his reputation on doing the unexpected. And according to his own account, he wasn't finished yet. Over the years, Abagnale described a series of dramatic prison experiences and escape attempts. Stories involving aircraft lavatories, airport runways, and narrow escapes from custody. These tales became some of the most famous parts of his legend. They also became some of the most heavily scrutinized. Researchers examining official records later questioned aspects of these stories, finding discrepancies between certain claims and available documentation. As with many parts of the Abagnale narrative, separating fact from fiction proved difficult. But one thing is clear: whether every detail happened exactly as described or not, Frank had become something larger than a criminal suspect. He had become a storyteller, and the stories were spreading. By the early 1970s, the young man who had once run away from home was no longer an anonymous fraudster. His exploits were attracting attention, his reputation was growing, and his life was about to take another unexpected turn. Because after years spent deceiving banks and authorities, Frank Abagnale would eventually find himself working with the very people who had once hunted him. Or at least, that was the story. For decades, Frank Abagnale's story has captivated millions. A teenage conman who impersonated a pilot, a doctor, a lawyer, a master fraudster who stayed one step ahead of authorities while cashing forged checks around the world. It is a story so extraordinary that Hollywood turned it into a blockbuster, a story that transformed a criminal into a legend. But every legend raises the same question: how much of it is true? For years, most people accepted Frank Abagnale's version of events. After all, why wouldn't they? The story was compelling, detailed, entertaining, and Frank himself was a gifted storyteller. But decades after his rise to fame, journalists and researchers began examining the claims more closely. Not the legend, the records. What they found surprised many. Some of the events Frank described were difficult to verify. Certain timelines appeared inconsistent. Some official records seemed to contradict parts of the story that had been repeated for years. Researchers began asking uncomfortable questions. Had Frank really traveled as extensively as claimed? Did he truly hold some of the positions he later described? Were certain adventures exaggerated? Or had some never happened at all? The deeper investigators looked, the more complicated the picture became. This wasn't a simple case of truth or fiction. Some elements of Frank's criminal history are well documented. His involvement in check fraud is not seriously disputed. His arrests and convictions are matters of record. But many of the details that made him famous exist in a gray area, supported by some evidence, questioned by other evidence, and debated to this day. Which creates a fascinating possibility. What if Frank Abagnale's greatest deception wasn't pretending to be a pilot, or a doctor, or a lawyer? What if it was convincing the world of a larger-than-life version of himself? After serving his sentence, Frank reinvented himself once again, this time as a security consultant, an expert on fraud prevention, a man who advised businesses, organizations, and government agencies on how to protect themselves from the very crimes he once committed. It was an extraordinary transformation, from criminal to consultant, from fugitive to public figure, and from con man to authority. But even this chapter of his life attracted scrutiny. Critics questioned aspects of his professional history. Supporters defended his reputation. And the debate continued. In many ways, that debate misses the bigger point. Because whether every detail of Frank Abagnale's story happened exactly as described is only part of the mystery. The more interesting question is why so many people believed it. Why do stories like this capture our imagination? Why are we fascinated by imposters? Perhaps because they reveal something uncomfortable about human nature. We want to believe confidence. We trust appearances. We assume authority is earned. And when someone understands those instincts, deception becomes possible. Frank Abagnale understood that lesson better than most. Whether he fooled airlines, banks, journalists, or perhaps all of them at different times, his story remains a powerful reminder that the most effective lies rarely rely on force. They rely on trust. The truth about Frank Abagnale may never be fully settled. Some records support parts of his story, others challenge it. And somewhere between fact and fiction lies the real man. Not just a fraudster, not just a storyteller, but a symbol of how easily perception can become reality. And perhaps that is the final irony. The world remembers Frank Abagnale as one of history's greatest impostors. But after all these years, we may still be trying to figure out who he really was. The Impostor Files case closed, or perhaps still open.